Good evening. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, September 18th, 2019, please come to order? For the benefit of those who may not have participated in Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. 1, the Secretary will read the legal call of the meeting as published in the local newspapers. 2, the applicant will be invited to come forward and present the case, explaining to the Commission and others present what is being requested of this property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. There will be clarifying questions from the commissioners. 3, there will then be the opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. First, those who wish to support the application may come forward. Second, those who oppose the application will then be invited to come forward. As this is a public hearing, it must be recorded. It is necessary for speakers to identify themselves, state their name and address before addressing the commission. 4, the applicant is then free to leave for the remainder of the balance of the meeting, the public hearing and the regular meeting, at which time the commission will try and reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has the right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. 5, decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office, 203-453-8039, after 9 a.m. Seated this evening are the following members: Sean Cosgrove, Matt Yerzinski, Richard Wallace. I'm Philip Johnson. This is Alan Brown, Scott Edmonds, Jason Marchi, and Jamie Stein. Staff present tonight are Town Planner George Kroll, Zoning Enforcement Aaron Mannix, and our recording secretary is Lisa Piombino. The videographer this evening is Peter Schultz. The secretary will now read the legal notice.
Commission discussion with Glenn Chalder, Planometrics, to discuss expectations of zoning code rewrite. This isn't the legal notice. Excuse me. Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on September 18th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. at location Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, excuse me, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, Monunketuck Room, 2nd floor, for the following purposes. Sean Portley, 65 Sachem's Head Road, map 21, lot 22, zone R5, coastal site plan application to remove existing single-family dwelling and associated utilities and construct new family dwelling, tenant, driveway, utilities, and subsurface sewage disposal system. Daniel Halley, 342 Water Street, map 27, lot 1, zone R6, coastal site plan for a new in-ground swimming pool. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the Office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communications will be received. Dated at Guilford, Connecticut, this 27th day of August, 2019. Phil Johnson, Chairman.
Thank you. If anybody is here this evening for the Vigliotti construction application, there was a request that's been granted to continue that to our first meeting on October, which is October 2nd, 2019. That being said, let's move to our first of the public hearing items. Sean Portley, 65 Sachem's Head Road, map 20.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
What do we have?
That's also going to be
We're opening and continuing. Very good. We'll open and continue to the 16th. Daniel Halley, 342 Water Street, map 27, lot 1, zone R6, coastal site plan for new in-ground swimming pool.
On the Vigliotti, you should move to continue the hearing to the 2nd of October. Please.
Hold on. Can I get a motion to move the Vigliotti application to the Vigliotti special permit?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Michael Harkin. I'm a professional engineer and principal of Harkin Engineering, located at 78 Wolf Hollow Lane in the town of Killingworth, Connecticut. Again, here tonight on behalf of my client, Daniel Halley, for a proposed swimming pool at 342 Water Street. You may remember back in 2018, I was in front of you for the same project. At this time, you had approved the swimming pool that you see here behind the residence in pink. Again, it's 20 by 40. We had a favorable letter from DEP at that time. Mr. Halley did not build the pool at that time. He decided to change the orientation. It's more of not a new swimming pool application, but a site plan modification. You can see what he's trying to do is He took the pool and just cocked it 90 degrees. That's the only real difference that you see between the two plans, is that before it was going into the bank, now it's going back out that way. Okay, there's actually less disturbance in the plan that you see here in green. We do have in the file, we reviewed this with town staff. I don't think we have any issues. I think we covered them all. Additionally, there's a favorable letter from Planning and Zoning, or from DEP. Their only concern was just to let us know and remind us that we're pretty close to a FEMA flood zone, and that with the increasing water and the rise of sea level, just to be aware of that with the pool, and the client is aware of that.
There are several letters in here from town staff. There's one from DEP. Yep. Alan, you want to take the one from Dennis? I think it's the first one. That one.
Planning and Zoning Commission, Dennis Johnson, Director of Health, October 20th, 2009. Haley Daniel, 342 Water Street, map 24, lot 1. The application proposed pool installation does not conflict with existing septic system design or location.
Outstanding. Next one's from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Planning and Zoning Commission, Town of Guilford, care of Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, 50 Boston Street, Guilford. RE Coastal Site Plan Review to construct 20-foot by 40-foot long in-ground swimming pool at 342 Water Street. Daniel Halley, applicant. Dear Commissioners, thank you for referring this application for an in-ground swimming pool on August 20th, 2019 for us to review and comment. Project description: the subject property is a 1.5-acre waterfront lot, tidal wetlands frontage in the R6 district, which hosts 2 single-family residences. The applicant proposes to build a 20-foot wide by 40-foot long in-ground swimming pool entirely in the X zone. The proposed site for the swimming pool is 60 feet from the tidal wetlands, 65 feet from the CJL, and 12 feet from the mapped AE10 flood zone. Given the location of the swimming pool to the CJL, tidal wetlands, and the flood zone, floodwaters may wash over the swimming pool occasionally. The applicant may wish to check with his engineer to determine whether the construction of the swimming pool itself should be fortified if floodwaters do wash over it or otherwise adversely affect the swimming pool. Coastal resources on the waterfront include tidal wetlands, coastal hazard area, AE10, AE11, and X, developed shorefront and shorelands. Conclusion: the applicant should be aware of flood lines are periodically adjusted by FEMA, and the pool is relatively close to various coastal resources and may be adversely affected by coastal storms. We hope these comments are helpful to the Commission. Pursuant to CJS Section 22A-110, we request these comments be read into the record at the public hearing for this application. If we can be of further assistance to you in this or other coastal management or Long Island Sound related matters, please feel free to contact me at 860-424-3138. Sincerely, Carol Zemansky, Environmental Analyst 2. Do you have a copy of this?
Yes.
Who wants the next one?
I'll take it. For this?
Sure.
This is with Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, regarding coastal area management application 342 Water Street. The applicant is proposing to install a 20 by 40 foot in-ground swimming pool on a ledge just outside of the FEMA flood zone AE, in parentheses EL10. The coastal resources of concern are tidal wetlands. The mitigation measures noted in the site plan provide for erosion and sedimentation control measures that are designed to protect the adjacent coastal resources as long as they are properly installed and maintained. The Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection regulates the discharge of pool water and requires pool contractors to be registered under the general permit for the, quote, discharge of swimming pool wastewater. The general permit provides standards that the contractors would follow while working on pools, which include limits on chemicals being discharged and the requirements to discharge to subsurface infiltration system. In order to make sure that the coastal resources are protected, I recommend the following conditions of approval. The Town of Guilford zoning enforcement officer should be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to site construction. Soil stockpiles should be contained by silt fencing and or hay bales. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until vegetation is established or suitable material is installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement. all discharges from the swimming pool be discharged in accordance with the latest version of the Connecticut Deep General Permit for Discharge of Swimming Pool Wastewater.
Those conditions acceptable?
Yes.
This is just a can, but I'm curious,
Sure.
is it a saltwater pool?
I don't know if it's gone that far yet. Generally, I can tell you 90% of the pools that we design are saltwater now, so I would assume that it would be, being so close, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I mean,
Yeah.
our purview is really just making sure that the coastal resources are protected.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's chlorinated, they wouldn't discharge to the ground, they would actually remove the pool water if need be.
Yeah, I was just thinking in the event of a major storm or something.
Yeah, they'll wash.
Right.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, we're at elevation 16. The area of the tidal wetlands is at elevation 4, so that the seawater's got to come up 12 feet before it even touches the pool. So it's quite a distance.
Any questions from commissioners?
Did you, you're the engineer?
Yes, sir.
Did you, it said here, the applicant may wish to check with the engineer to determine whether the construction of the swimming pool and should be fortified for floodwaters. Do it wash over or cause adverse situation in the swimming pool? Did you look into that?
Yeah, yes, we did. The embankment and the amount of distance that has to erode in order to cause that pool to fail is so great that it has no effect on that pool.
Is it a gunite pool?
I believe it's going to be a gunite pool. Again, we're just dealing with the site. We're not the ones physically designing the pool, you know. It could be a liner, could be the prefab fiberglass. We just don't know at that point. Generally what happens is we get the pool approved in the location because that's the big thing, and then the homeowner decides, looking at the expense, if it's going to be a gunite pool, if it's going to be the liner pool. It definitely will have the main drains in the bottom, so if there's any groundwater, God bless you, that it will suck up so it doesn't float. It's anti-buoyancy.
Could you show me where the high water line is?
Sure.
Would be average high water, right?
Right there.
And the distance to the pool then is,
I believe it was in the letter 65 feet, I think they stated, or 60 feet.
yeah, and then the elevation, and then, and what's that material there?
What's that material? It's the existing embankment.
Is it rock? Or- 'cause it-
This area up in here is rock ledge, all the way around there. The ledge is exposed in this area. It's about 4 feet deep in this area. This is just normal fill. I can't dig in that jurisdiction,
Right, so you don't
but
know
it's
what's there.
probably going to be,
Okay.
3 feet of fill and then ledge rock all the way up.
Okay.
Any questions from the audience? Would anyone like to speak in favor of the application? Would anyone like to speak against the application?
Close the public hearing.
Would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we, why don't we act on the Halley application, and then we will go to Glenn, okay? So,
Maybe could I also do the Guilford Arts Center application, and everybody will leave, and you can spend the rest of the night here with Glenn.
that sounds good. So, we need to make a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Thank you. So let's discuss the Halley application. Well, actually, we need a motion first, don't we? Shoot.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a coastal site plan application for Daniel Halley, 342 Water Street, map 27, lot 1, for a new in-ground pool as shown on application dated 8/12/19 and swimming pool dated 1/30/18, revised to 8/12/19, prepared by Harkin Engineering. The application is approved with the conditions stipulated by Kevin McGee in his letter. The application is approved based on finding that it conforms with the zoning code and is consistent with the coastal management policies of the state of Connecticut.
Thank you. Someone like to second that?
Second.
Discussion. I mean, we approved this before, it's,
Just turned it the other way.
it actually looks like it's somewhat less invasive than it was before, but it looks pretty straightforward. precautions seem to be in place. Aaron's going to make sure everything is hunky-dory.
Why would someone do a salt pool versus the standard chlorine pool? I don't know.
Just because of proximity to the water?
So is it a requirement or
No,
no?
I don't think so. It's just,
People are
No.
being cautious?
Local preferences, just sometimes,
Okay.
some people like chemicals, some don't.
Got it.
so we have a motion, we have a second. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Enjoy your pool. Let's jump to a site plan for the Guilford Arts Center. 411 Church Street, map 80, lot 24, zone I-1 and R5 site plan revision to allow construction of small addition and reconfiguration of driveway and parking area. We will receive, and they have requested that we take action.
Sir. Good evening again. Again, for the record, my name is Michael Harkin. I'm a professional engineer and principal of Harkin Engineering, located at 78 Wolf Hollow Lane in the town of Killingworth, Connecticut. Again, here tonight on behalf of the Guilford Arts Center for their project located at 411 Church Street, which is known as Assessor's Map 80, Lot 24. Basically, you can see highlighted in magenta is the existing property line. It's around 1.4 acres. There is a lot of wetlands surrounding the parcel. As you drive in off of Church Street, you have this long driveway that comes in. In green, you see building number 1, which is the classroom building. Down here is building number 2, which is the office space. There is a small retail space in there as well. And building number 3 is the pole barn in back, where they actually do some metalwork and things of that nature. What we have proposed tonight is a small building addition. And the architect is here with me tonight, Russell Campaign from CK Architects. So after my presentation, he can go into the physical design of that addition. It's located on building number 1. It's important to note that it's an equal transfer. Inside the building, there's some storage space and some classrooms. They're basically taking the classroom addition and balancing that out with the storage space in there. So as far as physical classroom and seats, it's relatively staying the same. Okay, and that's important with regards to the health department not increasing the seating capacity of that building, so we don't have to increase the septic system on site. It's a fairly simple project. We've gone to town staff many a times, probably about 10, 11 times. We've talked to Aaron in the engineering department. Again, there's a lot of wetlands on the site. This dark line that takes up almost half the property is a 100-foot inland wetland setback. We're actually not doing anything, any major construction in that wetlands setback, so we don't need to go to inland wetlands. What we are doing is putting the addition in, a small sidewalk in this vicinity. This area that's existing pavement, we're going to make that impervious, or pervious pavers. This area in here right now, they park in this direction, basically tail ends north-south. But what happens is it doesn't allow for any traffic flow in here. So engineering have brought that up to us that, hey, we need to do something if we want this approved in order to create better traffic flow going through here. So what we did is we took these spaces in here, we made 2 parallel parking spaces, which now open that up to a 20-foot aisle width. Again, coming through here, there's parking in this vicinity for compact cars. But when you add those cars in here with these cars, again, it chokes down to about 14 feet. We've eliminated the parking in that area by putting in striping. So now we have a nice 20-foot aisle width for traffic flow, basically 2-way in there, just by changing the striping on the ground. Because we're losing so many spaces in that vicinity, we need to make them up somewhere. There's a lot of people that go to the Arts Center, so we're proposing to make them up in this area that you see here. Where currently there is a bunch of parking there anyways. It's a grassy area. People just pull up there when they're dropping off and picking up. So we're going to utilize that. Because we have the addition, which is an increase in impervious, we're putting in a little underground detention system to make up for that. So the pre versus post development runoff is going to be 0 basically, in accordance with the regulations. The health department had required us, because we are adding this addition on, we had to do what they call the B100 analysis, that we're not taking up any useful space for a proposed septic repair, which we were able to do some soil testing and find 2 areas, one for building 1 and one for building 2. Building 3 doesn't have any septic use or water use back there. So again, that's the project in a nutshell. The last sheet of our project plans is basically the detail sheet and everything as it relates to the health department. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Russ Campaign to go over the physical addition that's going to be added on to the building number 1.
Hello, I'm Russell Campaign from CK Architects, 131 Boston Street. We were approached by the Guilford Arts Center to sort of fulfill something that they've been working on for quite some time, actually, and raising money for, and to basically address that their ceramic studio was really pinched for storage space. And so primarily, the moving of the studio space was that there's an existing classroom space in this area of the building in the center that they're going to take over as storage for project use. So basically, the classes will have a place that they will have a designated storage location for their project to be worked on over multiple weeks in class, to store on shelving units in here, as well as a closed storage that's lockable and a hall storage, all of which basically are just addressing needs for the way that the classes are working and the way they're functioning. So to offset the loss of that existing studio class, we're building a new addition, just over 600 square feet over on the far side, and sort of closing in a new entry that sort of fits nicely into the plan and is one of the few places that actually that meets that is left on the site actually to develop. They received a variance associated with actually this side setback was encroaching beyond the building actually, so they received a variance a few years ago actually and registered it for just this portion, which is in this setback, believe it or not. So the rest of the building is non-conforming, but we did receive a variance to allow this to occur. And you know, stylistically and otherwise, it's in keeping with kind of the playful nature of the building, which is kind of a 70s vintage modern. So we're proposing this new addition that has sort of a single pitch roof similar to some of the other structures. It will have a transom window that brings northern light in from above and just sort of fills in that zone with another piece that's similar. There's sort of an opportunity with the extension of the existing wall here that's sort of a water feature that comes down, and they're planning to do ceramic tiles and maybe some metal features and such as a project for the students and such to do. But it's sort of, if you've been down there, the other building is multiple colors and multiple siding types and such. We've sort of picked up on that theme. It's not super visible, so it's its own kind of thing in there, but I think it's part of what it is that they want to represent the artistic nature of the program. And these are the other elevations, which are quite simple, but you can see they're existing. This is the new proposed. This is the feature wall that we're talking about. This is existing, and the pole barn and other buildings are behind. So I think it's a pretty straightforward, simple addition. As was said, we're maintaining the existing square footage of usable space of the program area with regard to parking and septic flows remains the same. We've addressed the variance associated with the small area that's non-conforming, and I think satisfied all the other regulations associated with the site plan requirements in its location. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
What is the coverage on the lot, and what is the maximum?
So, we're at 19.1% coverage. It's currently 18.1% coverage. So we're well within the regulations on that. Regarding the impervious surface, we are through the offsets of the pervious paving and such. We're remaining neutral. We are non-conforming with the total coverage on the site with where it sits now, but we're actually reducing the total amount of coverage through offsetting existing parking that's asphalt to be pervious parking. So that, I think, staff was feeling as though we were meeting that standard. And in the floor area, again, we're well under. We're at 20.1% after the additions were put on. So in all ways, we're compliant, except for the total impervious surfaces, which is set at 40%. But that's an existing condition, and as we said, we are offsetting that actually by quite a few square feet actually by the impervious surface that we're changing out existing asphalt to.
There's actually a couple letters. There's one from, let's see, Dennis Johnson, Director of Health. The applicant's proposed building addition does not conflict with the existing septic system or the potential repair or expansion areas on the site. Based on soil test, the site plan review, it is recommended the applicant's proposed addition be approved with the following conditions. The existing private well shall be legally abandoned prior to final approval of the addition by the town building official. Is there city water service today?
There is city water, yes. The well was pre-existing.
no water.
Again, the well is pre-existing over in this area. When we were doing our inspection, we found that it wasn't legally abandoned. So as part of the project, we had called out for it to be legally abandoned. So we agreed to those terms.
Scott, you want to tackle the one from Kevin?
Letter to the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission from Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, RE Site Plan Review for Guilford Arts Center. The applicant is proposing to construct a building addition, reconfigure parking, install pervious parking areas, and a pervious sidewalk. The applicant has completed the checklist to guide low-impact development-based management practices. They recommended practices with the construction of a pervious parking area and sidewalk. The impervious service coverage for the property is 65%. Impervious service coverage allowed in a I-1 zone is 40%. In order to maintain the existing impervious service coverage, the applicant is proposing to remove an existing paved parking area and replace it with pervious pavers along with the installation of an underground infiltration system. In order to make sure that the natural resources are protected, I recommend the following condition of approval. 1, the Town of Guilford Zoning Enforcement Officer shall be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to any site work. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until vegetation is established or suitable material is installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer. 2, a licensed engineer shall oversee the construction of the pervious sidewalk, parking areas, and underground stormwater management system to verify that the construction was conducted in accordance to the plans and best management practices. The licensed engineer shall provide a final report to the zoning enforcement officer.
Just copies of those?
I don't have copies of it, but we do agree to those things.
Okay, we'll give them to you after, just so you can have them. Any questions? Anyone?
Just the width, whether you're moving the parking spots out to that very narrow area. What's the width of the road is 20 foot?
Right in there.
Yeah, right there.
Yep. It's 20 foot all the way.
Okay, so the fire department is happy with access to them.
Yes, when we were there, we actually showed it to the fire department at one of the staff meetings.
Any plans to extend parking further down that route?
Further down.
No, like the ones that are on the right-hand
This
side.
way?
I mean, it looked to me like you could line them right up.
Yeah, absolutely, that's what everybody's asked. Reason being is this is a driveway, it's a right-of-way, so you have a lot of traffic coming in this vicinity. So I don't want the children coming in with the traffic that's coming down here.
Thank you.
So you have,
I should also note, actually, it was brought up associated with handicap parking to make sure we're meeting the current code requirements. And actually, they have a van space back here, and they have a regular handicap here. So with the loading of the building, we actually are fine in meeting the current code with the requirements of the state building.
And that's something that the town engineer, as well as zoning enforcement officer, have brought up to us. So for the record, we do meet the requirements.
you're taking a paved parking lot, I assume this blacktop, you're taking
Yes.
that up and you're gonna put pavers in there?
Yes, pervious pavers.
Solid pavers, right?
Solid pavers with the, yes, and the sand bed.
Because they make half pavers, but you don't want that in the parking lot.
No, sir, we don't want that.
Your motion?
So moved. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve the site plan application for the Guilford Arts Center at 411 Church Street, map 80, lot 24, as shown on the site development plan. Guilford Arts Center dated 8/20/19 and revised 9/19/19 by Harkin Engineering. The application is approved with the conditions stipulated by the town environmental planner. And Dennis Johnson's condition on removal of the existing well. The application is approved based on a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
I think, just for a point of clarification, I don't think you had to remove it, you just technically abandon it, right?
Just legally abandoning it, yes,
Got
sir.
it, okay. So,
Second.
discussion. Good project, seems to be well thought out.
Yeah.
Looks good.
You know. All right, anyone else? Call the vote. Actually, I'm going to have Jamie be an alternate on this one because we have the correct number of people, so. Call the vote, all in favor? Anyone against? Abstentions? Motion passes. Enjoy.
Thank you.
No. Yeah, sure. You got it.
Have a great night, guys.
Take care. Yeah, let's do that. So, I'm just going to quickly go through some of our housekeeping stuff, and then we'll go to Glenn, and then when Glenn's done, we can wrap up. So, let's see, revised subdivisions, Bennett Hall, trustee 135, Old Quarry Road, Narrows Island, map 6, lot 6B, zone R5, request for extension to 10/16/19.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Site plans, Post Road 640 LLC, 640 Boston Post Road, map 48, lot 25, zone TS. Site plan modification to allow for updates to existing building and revisions to parking and entrance extension granted to 10/16/19.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Walmart 900 Boston Post Road, map 47, lot 22B, zone SC. Site plan revision to allow for placement of 8 storage containers from October 1 till January 31st for 2019 and 20. Receipt and action tabled till 10/2/19.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Coastal site plans, Richard and Eileen Petrillo, 68 Trolley Road, map 8, lot 63A, zone R2, coastal site plan for new single-family residence, extension granted and public hearing scheduled for 10/2/19.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Bennett Hall again. 135 Old Quarry Road, Narrow Island, map 6, lot 6B, zone R5, coastal site plan for a 2-lot subdivision, receive and set a public hearing date for 10/16/19.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. All right, special permits. Benton's Knoll LLC, 215 Colonial Road, Sachem's Head Road, map 8, lot 24, zone R5, special permit request for modification to approve planned residential development to increase septic capacity and allow for a total of 43 bedrooms, 33 bedrooms previously approved, receipt and set public hearing for 10/2/19.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? John Sanders, 73 Meadow Street, map 32, lot 85, zone R6, special permit and coastal site plan for remediation of approximately I'm going to assume that's 1,720 square feet of tidal wetlands due to unauthorized filling, receipt and set public hearing date for 10/2/19.
So moved.
I heard a second down there. All in favor? Thank you. Michelle Ladano, 18 Graves Ave, map 40, lot 18, zone R1, special permit application per section 273-13C to change one non-conforming commercial industrial use to another non-conforming use as a 2-family residence in a R1 zone for a total of 3 residential units on the property. Receipt and set public hearing for 10/16/19.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Daniel Earl, 18 Edwin Court, map 93, lot 46, zone R8, special permit per section 273-94 to construct a detached unheated garage with attic storage. Receipt and set public hearing date for 10/16/19.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Daniel Earl again, 18 Edwin Court, map 93, lot 46, zone R8, special permit per section 273-19 to construct a detached accessory apartment to be used a pool house with exterior covered terrace. Set and receipt and set public hearing for 10/16/19.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? And a mandatory referral. The Board of Selectmen at its September 16, 2019 meeting recommended to the Planning and Zoning Commission under CGS 8-24 acquisition of a conservation easement for 135 Old Quarry Road, Assessors Map 6, Lot 6B, in accordance with CGS 47-42C and Town Charter 7-7, tabled to 10/16/19.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That being said, the only business other than, well, let's just take care of this first then. Let's just get approval of bills for shore publishing for $215. Would like to make a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Thanks to abstain.
Okay. While we're here, we'll just review the minutes. I read them, and they appear to be substantially correct.
Yeah.
Would someone like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. One abstention. That being said, we would love to hear from Glenn Chadler from Planometrics to discuss expectations of the zoning code rewrite. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Glenn Chadler from Planometrics. I'm going to have a chance to work with you over the next year and a half or so to update the zoning regulations to try to make them more user-friendly, to accomplish the goals and objectives of the commission, and that's actually why I'm here tonight. I'd like to hear what your desires are for these regulations in terms of outcomes, process, and other stuff. We're at the very early stages. I sat down with George and with Aaron to kind of get some of their thoughts. Over the next month or two, my intention is to meet with regulation professionals, lawyers, engineers, architects, people who come before you regularly to get their take on the regulations, reach out to community and neighborhood groups to kind of get their experiences on the regulations, their thoughts and feelings, and then come back to you in November with sort of a report that says, okay, here's what I think I've heard and what my initial recommendations are in terms of the regulations.
Could you move closer to the microphone, please?
There you go. Thank you. It's my first rodeo here, so thank you very much. I'll stand for now. I think I'll sit down in a moment. I may do that because I won't be able to take notes very effectively if I don't do that. So that's sort of the overview of the process. And again, I think the most important part here is to hear your thoughts and ideas about the regulations, your desires for the process and the outcomes. So do you have any questions for me, or do you want to just launch right into the regulations and your thoughts about them, however you'd like to proceed?
The material that you submitted to
Good.
the commission, some of you, I'm sure, have read it.
I think part of the inclination for this process is our zoning code really hasn't, there's a lot of conflicting elements and elements that refer to other parts. And unless you're an architecture or engineering professional that works with it a lot, it's pretty cumbersome. So, I think it'd be pretty well accepted if it was a little more user-friendly and someone didn't necessarily have to have a professional engineer or architect in order to at least understand it.
So I think, is it okay if I sit and, I'll bring it down. Perfect. Excellent. I think, there we go. So one of the things I like to do with a set of regulations is to add illustrations and other things like that. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I try to organize it effectively, try to get like provisions together. For those of you who have some nautical background, oftentimes regulations, and I think Guilford's are probably a good example, become like a multi-stranded or multicolored rope. And I think the goal is to try to get the colored strands together so that people are confident, if you will, that as they approach a project with cross-references and language together, they can find what they need to know quickly and make an effective decision about whether or not to proceed. I think the fear of myself and for staff and other people is that you're always afraid you're going to miss something. And so I think by organizing the regulations, clearing out dust bunnies and other things like that, I think is to get a set of regulations that will accomplish those types of objectives. So I think that's certainly my goal, and I'm glad to hear that that's the Commission's desire as well.
And part of that, is there a way, because inevitably changes occur down the road, something new comes up. So if we make additions to it, which we've done in the past, and it starts to get unwieldy, can you build something in that we can have more logic to the additions?
So I think the challenge we have with general code at the present time, or the code structure, if you will, that it becomes sort of a sequential addition, that things get added to chapter 119 or whatever the number was. Our goal is going to be to create an expandable structure that will allow like provisions to be in the places that they need to be. So for example, if we add a new business zone, it would go in the location with other business zones. And again, people would find it and it would tie to the other provisions. So we're going to be working with General Code to understand how we might accomplish this easily. Other communities have done this, and so we're confident that we're going to find a way to do it. And I think the structure is probably the key element to user friendliness and understanding of the regulations and allowing them to move forward. So that's something early on in our work program, yes.
One of the things that we've bumped into in the past is that we've come across terms that have been, let's call them undefined. We had one a while back where one of the issues at hand was existing grade. And there's no, other than us saying it is or it isn't, there's nothing that says if it's been this way for X number of years, then this is what it is. So it really fell upon us to make a determination as to what that term actually meant. Will there be a definition section that says, okay, a setback is, the distance between this part and the first portion of construction of whatever it is, just to make it very clear. So again, you're a lawyer, but besides you, soon, hopefully. So we don't have to be the body that actually interprets what the actual defined terms are.
I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think that my goal is going to be to go through the definitions you have today. I try to craft regulations. Word has buried within it a grade reading level. I try to write the regulations for about an 8th grade reading level. It's not a criticism, but it's just of anybody's ability to read or understand. But if we're using big words or jargon or everything else, people lose out. And so the issue is, let's make it simple. Let's use pictures to illustrate so people understand the issue. And it certainly makes staff's job a lot easier on that. I'll read through the regulations and see what definitions I think may be missing or may benefit. I do recall at one time working on something with George, this definition, I think we were measuring building height from pre-existing grade and what. Exactly, and that's, you may be the only town in the state that does that. So I'll look at these types of situations and suggest possible wording changes, et cetera, for you. And the work I'll be doing, I'll be using revisions marking, so you get a chance to sort of see how changes are evolving as we go along, so you'll be able to keep up on the regulations. The other thing I'm a big fan of is that there are some professional publications out there. One of them is called the Illustrated Book of Development Definitions. And so I recommend in the definitions section, we say if it's not defined in the regulations, we're also going to be looking at the building code, state statutes, Black's Law Dictionary, Merriam-Webster Dictionary, but also the Illustrated Book of Development Definitions. And those are information, if you will, for the commission. So you can look at 3 or 4 or 5 definitions and say, it seems to us that what we're attempting to accomplish here falls here. So rather than you having to do a novel approach each time or be faced with something, you've now got some references that you can use, and if some of these sources are available online, so people, again, can find out. So to deal with these issues, I think, is a good start to helping the commission in the interpretation, et cetera.
This is kind of a two-part one. You indicated this is probably going to be a year to a year and a half process. Is there any way to potentially request certain components potentially be addressed or fast-tracked so we can potentially adopt them in advance of the whole plan itself? We've been looking at various issues with respect to interior lots, and it's been somewhat problematic, so I'm sure staff and other people would appreciate if you could take a peek at that, see where we're problematic, and if there's a potential logical fix that we could implement before the whole program, that hopefully dovetails to the end product.
Well, I think, appreciate you bringing that up. I've made a note of it. I'll take a look at that as part of my initial research and come back to the commission with a suggestion on what to do. There have been situations in other municipalities where I've had a chance to work where we address the problems right up front. So I start to get a sense pretty quickly how the regulations are going to need to flow and balance each other. And so any issues of consistency or possible inconsistency is something we become aware of, but we can get it on the books quickly and then weave it into the regulations as well. I think I'd urge us to keep the list as small as possible, and the only reason being is that I think one of the things that's most challenging professionally from working on a set of regulations is you have to take this multicolored rope apart, and you can't lose a strand. You have to keep track of all of the pieces. So taking things out of sequence can create some challenges. So as long as it's one or two, or just a few, I think we're okay. But if we started picking out a dozen or so, my mind's going to explode.
Just a couple that are problematic.
Thank you.
We're talking about starting from scratch, basically, and rebuilding them, or basically kind of just
I think that
morphing what the existing
morphing, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. And I think the reason is that the entire land use structure in Guilford is built around the regulations you have today. So if we threw them out and started from scratch, we run the risk that we would create inconsistencies or nonconformities across the board, and that makes everybody's life challenging. So I think it's much easier to work with what we've got, to organize it in a more understandable, compelling way, to get rid of inconsistencies that exist in the regulations and have clarity. And then we can look at the policies and say, okay, this is in fact what we want to do, or we've been doing this for years, we want to continue to do it, or it's time for change. But it becomes a conscious effort on the part of the commission that the changes, nothing is going to surprise you, nothing's going to get sprung on you, nothing's going to come out of nowhere and hit us in the back of the head. So to try to manage the process, and because of the importance of the land use framework for all the people in town who have mortgages or financing on their property or anything else, let's not mess with that unless we as a commission believe that we need to make a policy change. So I think my goal is to try to keep the fabric we've got and improve and enhance it. If I've got experience in other communities on a regulation that could be more efficient to accomplish our objectives, more direct, fewer words, same result, et cetera, I'll bring that experience here to say, okay, let's talk about this type of approach, or maybe there's a regulation other municipalities have that Guilford doesn't. Maybe would you be interested in something like this? And try to do it in a structured way so that you sort of see the building blocks coming together and you're comfortable and happy with the final product. That would be my goal.
Along those lines, in terms of the process, and in terms of in terms of transparency for the public, when these changes are made, what is the process in terms of demonstrating what the regulations were and how they're changing in each kind of area, so that the public so we can be transparent and everyone can see how this is morphing, how this is shifting, and also see what it was and what is better about the new design.
So what I generally try to do is iterations of the regulations, so that first step for me, for example, is going to be, first of all, to listen to what people have to say, and then start to reorganize the regulations to put the colors together. It's then when we start to see inconsistencies or definition conflicts or other things like that, and that becomes sort of the first edition. So really no changes to text, it's just a reorganization to sort of get a sense of where things are likely to end up. From then on, we'll start to make changes in the regulations. I cannot guarantee to the commission or the community that we will be able to have a very clean set of regulations that says from where we are sitting today on September whatever, that these are the changes now to the final. It's almost impossible. Word allows you to keep track of who makes changes, but it doesn't allow you to keep track of by date. And the colors get crazy, and I tried to do it one time, and I was ready to shoot myself by the end. So the pledge that I make to you and throughout the process is that each iteration will be a change. The changes will be apparent from the last version. So if somebody says, well, where did this come from? They can actually go to the regs and actually track it through. But if somebody wants to show up at the last meeting and say, well, what changed from what is existing, that's going to be very, very hard. So we will be transparent in our workings, but that one element I have not found a perfect solution for yet. But my pledge is that we will have an iterative situation that somebody can go back and look and say, okay, between version 3 and 4, this changed, and the minutes hopefully will reflect why we made the changes.
Will we have the opportunity to approve different sections in bites as opposed to all at once?
I would hope so. My goal would be that we would have working sessions, that we would come to you. I would generally issue a set of regulations as a complete package. The reason being is that if you have a favorite section and it's not something I deliver to you, you're going to be worried about, well, where did it go? Did I lose something? No, I'll give you a complete set of regulations so you can see how it all goes together. And then we would deal with, for example, sections 1, 2, and 3 in one evening or something like that and work through it. And then the next version, after we've had a chance to work through the entire set of regulations, would be the next edition or version of the regulations. And that would show revisions markings from what we talked about. So you would say, well, I thought we wanted to change the size of a parking stall. And the issue is, yeah, you'll see it in red type, boom. We talked about it, and here's the new text. So if I misheard or misunderstood, you'll get a chance to correct me, and you'll be aware of the changes as we go through.
Then I'm really interested in how the public would navigate these regulations. And I'm just wondering, does it have to be a document? Are there other ways that the public can sort of navigate and go through these? Are there innovative sort of things that you've seen? I know from your website you've done a bunch of sort of the neighboring towns. I wonder if there's, something else out there rather than, the public trying to open something like that.
Well, I think the organization of the book can make the hugest difference. I'm playing around with a number of situations now that, for legal reasons, I think we have to have a set of regulations which is published and is a record. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the way that people interact with the regulations because, for example, most people don't open the regulations and start reading from page 1 and then finally found the thing that they need on page 100. They try to short-circuit it. So maybe short-circuit isn't it? Sorry, fast track, thank you. We don't want to short-circuit anybody here. So there are a number of different examples out there that we're playing around with. For example, that most people use the regulations one of two ways. Either they have a piece of property, what can they do with it? So very often that means you go to the zoning map to figure out what zone it's in. If you could click on either the zone or your property, it would take you to the uses and dimensional standards. Right now, you're probably 50 or 80% of the way through what you need to know on the regs. And then the question is, well, there's other standards for parking and signage and landscaping and coastal areas and all these types of things. And we can help you navigate to those in an interactive way. So we allow people to customize the way that they would go through the regulations. So the challenge I've had with that is that some town attorneys aren't really comfortable that the regulatory experience is different from everybody. So I think if we explain to people, these are the regulations and you are experiencing them in a user-friendly configuration, but that doesn't replace what the book says. So we can get there, but I've talked with Aaron and George about the town attorney who has a lot of experience in this area. And if the town attorneys, I've had the kibosh put on this before, and if the town attorney is comfortable with this, I think I'm getting the sense the commission would.
It's almost like you put a disclaimer on saying, this is what, the closest we have to get you to where you want to be, but the actual legal document is the.
And so that becomes a web application. So you could find yourself in either the commission website or the department website and say, okay, zoning regulations, and then there's two choices. One is, do you want to just, see the book, in which case click here, or would you like to use this interactive approach and click over here?
There's a series of questions we always would drop down. Are you a homeowner or are you a business owner? Do you want to, change your site of business, or do you want to add an addition on? So it could direct them from those answers to narrow down what they're actually looking for.
Yeah, almost even like, if you've got a map of the town, being able to click on where
exactly.
the parcel is that you live, without having to figure out that you're an R5 or an R, so you can click on it, and it might then pop up, here's where you live, here's what your zone is, here's what your regulations are, so it customizes it to you.
Especially because currently we have overlays on top of our zoning maps as well. There's multiple layers that are involved, and that's not very obvious right now. If you're looking at a certain lot, it's not obvious necessarily if it's in one of the special districts that we've had a special amendment about, or anything like that.
Or even potentially, putting in an address and a street number and a
Correct.
street.
And that, yeah.
Who does your GIS?
Provides-
They're my GIS guys too. So I mean, I think I've been working with them on this particular situation. So I think a searchable web link. I live at 17 Buttercup Lane. Boom. 17 Buttercup Lane has the following. The basic zone is this, but you have 2 overlays, and so as a result, here's a summary, if you will, for your property. Again, it doesn't replace the regulations, but you're going to get, what do they say, with 10% of the effort, you get 90% of the results. The last 10% that takes 90%. So maybe we can find a way to get people to the vast majority of what they need to know to make a decision. Probably still going to need an engineer, an architect, and other situations like that. But if they understand conceptually whether or not something is possible or feasible, or understand it better, that would be a great outcome.
I'd like to hear from the staff what your top 5 are. I mean, I'm new to the commission, new to the town, so I don't really know the past struggles of the zoning code. I'm just wondering, if you had 3 to...
I wasn't prepared for that. We already had our meeting.
We have no struggles or anything.
Right?
Smooth sailing.
We know all of these things. We know where every little nuance is and every little contradiction, but no.
When was the last time we did this?
The last time the whole thing was kind of rewritten, I think, was in 1978, maybe.
Wow.
I mean, we've added, it's created, a big part of the problem is we've added things over the years, and they've just been sort of, as Glenn said, tacked on to the end. And so they're not where they're supposed to be, and sometimes the language is different, and it's very difficult to navigate it unless you're totally familiar with it.
Added zoning districts and...
Right.
Vetoes and...
Right.
But my question was serious.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
No, that's one major concern that we have is readability of the regulations and knowing where items are. We have several areas that need to be updated to be current with respect to state law, statutes, compliance, things like that. We have some areas, as Phil had mentioned, interior lot is problematic currently, as is some of the ways that we take building height. Those we would like to address, especially accessory structures. We have areas where, on our zoning map, that are not identified. In past practice, the Planning and Zoning Commission, you had regulations to allow open space subdivisions under the planning statutes that essentially waived zoning regulations that were not authorized within the zoning code. So I think we need to have some discussion as to how to go back and correct some of these areas where the intent of the open space subdivisions, when they were approved as subdivisions, allowed variations in the bulk standards for the zone, but they're not protected by the zoning map to reflect those. So I think we would require some updates to the regulations to protect those setbacks, those standards that have been created, and also reflect that in the map. Same thing with some planned residential developments as well. So that when somebody comes to look at their properties and know what their setbacks are, we have, everything is listed as an R8 residential zone in North Guilford, yet some of those areas very specifically were approved with variations from the bulk standards, and those should be reflected in the map.
Well, the power of GIS these days is kind of remarkable. So if we actually had the ability to identify where PRDs and open space subdivisions were, and this is the exterior boundary of it, it could be the type of thing, again, you would click on the parcel, and you would say, oh, well, never mind the fact you're in an R17 zone or whatever it might be, you're actually in a special PRD or whatever, and maybe then it's a link or a click link to what's on file in the town clerk's office and say, okay, well, the dimensional standards are, you know, they're not actually here in the book, they're different, because you've got to think about sort of the different ways that we need to get people the information that they need, and hopefully.
Also to authorize that zoning designation for them, because I think it was not necessarily done legally when they were authorized under the planning, under the subdivision regulations versus under the zoning code.
Understood. So, I mean, I think just for a little peace of mind, that every couple of years, I think it's every 2 years, the legislature adopts what's called the reviser's bill. I think it's usually Special Act number 1, and it says, listen, if something's existed on the ground for the last 4 years without an enforcement action, it's blessed. So, in other words, we're not going to throw enforcement actions at people that have houses on the ground, et cetera, so it's blessed. But I think for us in zoning going forward, we also need, if they want to put on an addition or an
that those standards apply to those lots.
And hopefully not create, if there's a homeowners association, not create a problem within the homeowners association. So
that's something I just, over the last week, spoke with Chuck Andrews on and have some legal opinion on that I can share with you.
Chuck, when I call Chuck, he's not going to take my phone call because he's like, oh no, he's calling about Guilford zoning.
To answer your question, another part of this discussion is, it's in a little bit different track, but using the zoning regulations as a vehicle to communicate to people how the specific zoning standard or specific zoning set of criteria or specific zone or section relates to the plans that were developed that created this particular dimension of criteria and regulation. For example, I know we've already talked a little bit about our coastal resilience plan, and there's a lot of discussion about coastal resilience plan issues. Some of them have resulted in changes in the zoning code or new criteria, so that when you're reading about coastal resilience in the zoning regulations, you're also you can also be referred to the coastal resilience plan if you want to read more about it. Not that the plan is going to give you the type of regulatory requirements that the code will, but at least you'll then begin to understand some of the background and the purpose related to that particular section. Another good example, I think we have done this in a couple cases. Town Center South, we have all these sort of special permit rules that relate to what you can do in Town Center South. If the reader is directed to the Town Center South plan, which they can also go on the town website and find and read, that helps them understand a little bit more about what the intent and purpose of these rules are, that they're not just some arbitrary things that are pulled out of thin air, but they're actually based on thoughtful, or at least hopefully thoughtful, planning rationale. So we can do some of that sort of thing, I think. I mean, Glenn has been involved in some of these planning studies that we've done over the years, and I think that would be helpful to the users if they could do that a little bit better through our planning process. One of the things I wanted to ask Glenn about is, for your benefit specifically, and also a little further clarification with me, he's asked us to prepare a list of users, and Aaron and I have been working on this, and I think you probably have a list of about 40 or 50 people, names or organizations of people who have an interest in the zoning code. How are you going to go about reaching them?
I think what we'll probably try to do is to kind of create meaningful associations or groups, if you will, so that if residents who have experience with the zoning regulations but aren't that knowledgeable are in the same room with, attorneys or architects or engineers who use it on a much more intense basis, they're going to feel intimidated. So I think what we try to do is find groups that we can get people together. Generally speaking, it's me and the group. I'm not saying you guys can't come, but I like or the commission either. But what I'd like to do is have a conversation with people. Everybody gets to let their hair down. If they want to vent about something, either with the process or people or anything, they can do that. I'll just listen. But it helps me understand the process and the situation better. So it's possible that, I think in our conversation, I was thinking in my mind, we were like four groups at least, maybe 5.
And that's fine, because I can be here all day so that people can drop in. I can do a scheduled meeting. It doesn't really matter. But I think the most important thing is that I get a chance to hear people's thoughts or concerns and digest them, and then I can organize and come back to the commission. And some, honestly, we're going to ignore, because people's desires on the regulations aren't practical under constitutional law or something else like that. But to try to get you a menu, if you will, or a strategy going forward, a plan of how we're going to approach this to address the issues that come up on how people use the regulations. So I think we've already got a lot of the names, I think. So if there's more, let me have them.
So
Because
this is going to be like engineers, architects, builders, developers.
Commissions. Private organizations.
But the idea is that probably during the day, Glenn has a room here at the community center from 9 to 11, and a specific group of people is invited to sort of stop in, at any point in time. A key is going to be how we communicate to them, and in fact, actually get them to come forward. And maybe I like your suggestion that we're not actually, Aaron and I in particular, are not invited. And people will know that, and so they can come and hopefully speak freely about, how they, the deficiencies that they've identified.
I think that's a very valid.
Do you think there's a mechanism whereby, whether it be a letter to the editor or some type of an article in the paper, we can invite people to put their names into the database so they're kept up to date?
Well, we can certainly do that, but I think the idea would be, we've got a list of 10 people for this particular group. We just reach out and tell them, this is the time and place, we'll write them a letter or email or whatever, talk to them personally and say, tomorrow or next week at this time, this is when you can plug into this process and please take advantage of it.
I think hopefully we'll, again, first thing I want to do is meet with staff, then meet with the commission, is have an article in the paper. We'll talk to the press about what we're doing and say, listen, we can set up could set up an email address or whatever that goes to town hall and routes to me or something people want to send, or just give them my email address or whatever. But, try to understand people's thoughts or concerns. Tell them when the meetings are, let them drop in, let them know about the process, and they can stay up to date as we go through this. Because sometimes wisdom comes from the strangest places. Just somebody's insight. Somebody in IT can say, well, why, we do this, why don't you guys think about doing it? And you say to yourself, wow, what a great idea. And so, boom, we're off and running. So I think the more people we get a chance to talk to, so we can share that information back with you, will be the help produce the best result.
That being said, how do we kind of protect from going too far in terms of trying to fix everything? Like, how do we avoid, I don't want to necessarily give examples, but I could envision someone coming up and wanting to completely redo our livestock percentages. You know what I mean? For instance.
What would you base that on?
Is that necessarily, how do you, not for you to divulge too many of your trade secrets, of course, but, how do we kind of protect ourselves from getting too deep into this as opposed to, how do we find that line?
I think we're going to find it together. The way the agreement is crafted, if you will, my compensation is the first part's a lump sum, which is that I know what I need to do in terms of community engagement and getting the first draft of each set of regulations together, because we're working on two sets, zoning and subdivision. Zoning is much more intensive in terms of community input. Subdivision regulations are more of a process, and so they're not quite as complicated. Then the agreement transitions into a hourly rate, and so I'm going to try to stop from going over the budget, because I don't want to have to ask you guys for more money. So if you ask me for something, there could be, then if you ask for this, I may not be able to do that. I think we've got an ample budget to get us through this process based on my experiences. If you decided you wanted to, I can't imagine what you can come up with, but I might have a franker conversation and say, listen, no, we're not going there. Because I think my job, I think really, is not to upset the apple cart in terms of your regulatory structure in town. We're going to take it and make it user-friendly. We're going to sand off the major rough edges that may exist in terms of inconsistencies, et cetera. If you want to delve into detail in terms of livestock units and other stuff, I may have something I can share with you, and you say, I really like what this town did, boom, we'll put it in, we'll go with it. On the other hand, if it starts to get really complicated, I mean, sign regulations are it's a rabbit hole. So.
The definition of a sign.
Yeah, there you go. I'm out of here. That was my crazy word, right? As soon as somebody said sign, I was out of here. So.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested, not just in the engagement piece. I mean, I'd like to sort of hear who those 10 people are, not their names, but like what sector they're coming from. I mean, I'm sort of fascinated to see who really uses these regulations and to what extent, because, you know, is there a way to capture the data that you get from your conversations in some type of visual way so that we can, I mean, it could be simple as a pie chart, it could be post notes that people come up and they put on, so we see that like nobody in the town understands FEMA regulations and what a VE zone is, right? Like, I just feel like there's ways to sort of...
I mean, basically what I've generally done in the past on this type of thing is I try to engage people in the way that they want to be engaged. So I've become experienced and knowledgeable about your regulations, but what I'm trying to extract from people is sort of the frustrations and the other things they found or experienced. FEMA is complicated enough that I don't think the average resident is really going to be able to navigate the FEMA standards. We're going to sort of lay it out for them as best we can. But you know, just in the fall of last year, they issued new regulations with new standards, and the language is just, it's crazy. It really is a silly program, but we're stuck with it. So we're going to do the best job we can there, but when it comes to things like FEMA, staff is going to be involved. They may need to hire an engineer, and we have to adopt, almost without a change, the state's regulations, because otherwise, nobody in town can get federal flood insurance under the National Flood Insurance Program, and we don't want that. So I guess we'll know our limits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I guess my question was kind of more in line with what Scott was saying about, you know, going down the rabbit hole of livestock. If we as a commission, you know, perhaps our question at a public hearing as to why we did or did not make a decision, if we had some way to point to the engagement data that said, you know, 65% of professionals that use the regulations ask for clarification or ask for this.
Produce a report. I expect to be back with you in November with my report based on what I've learned and my roadmap for going forward, what I think we ought to tackle and how we ought to tackle it. So I think that hopefully will give the commission the information you need to give me guidance going forward. And you know, I was joking about signs earlier. If it turns out signs are a huge issue in town, and that's the number one thing that people are concerned about, I don't think I'm going to have quantitative data for that says, well, X percent, but I'll report to you that this is a significant issue, and I think in the budget, I'm going to try to figure out how to spend time there to address these issues.
Well, maybe that this process will identify substantive areas of regulation or planning that are beyond the scope of this particular project, but will become another project. Like people are really worried about, you know, how we regulate agriculture. Rather than trying to fix that right now, we might set up a separate process that involves rewriting the agricultural regulations or something like that, or signs or whatever it might be.
He's setting up a system for them we can actually review an area if we feel like we need to.
I did some work for the town of Plainville some time ago. Their budget was roughly about half of the budget that we have here in Guilford, and so it clearly was a case that they said reorganize the regulations, and the analogy we used as part of that process is we want to treat these sections by getting everything together as kind of a rack-mounted server. So when we want to change our parking regulations, we're going to take it out and plug the new ones in. Boom. So we can tackle this as time goes on, and they've done it and been diligent about it. So once you have the organizational structure, you don't just keep adding sections onto the end, which then is almost impossible to try to cross-reference and navigate. If you get the things where they need to be, it becomes a module, and the regs become modular, and I think that will help the commission in the future too. Tweak the things you want to tweak or add new sections in, so it's meant to be expandable that way.
I have one more comment that's slightly more of a comment than a question, but just an interesting part of this. In reading through our current zoning code, there is a ton of references that say, you know, by the discretion of the commission. Like, it's everywhere, and it's been used, in my estimation, as kind of a catch-all to give us lots of discretionary decision-making power. Now, granted, that's the point of the commission. That's the reason why we're here, is because you can't cover every base, so you need to have this commission to, be the voice of the town. But it's going to be interesting. I think it's something that I think all the commissioners, as well as other town staff, perhaps even Board of Selectmen, to think about what are things in the zoning code should be at the discretion of the commission versus things that maybe currently are the discretion that shouldn't be, you know what I mean? That's going to be an interesting challenge, I think, that we should really think about. If we're reviewing through the zoning code and noticing something that says, well, this doesn't necessarily seem like something that we should just be deciding on our own, it maybe should be something that's actually specified.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between, there are degrees, there's a degree beyond which we might have too much discretion.
Correct.
But a code that is so rigid,
Correct.
we just become rubber stamps.
Absolutely.
And we have no discretion.
And it's not necessarily for us to decide either. There should be other people. When you're talking about users, that might be some group that you want to add to your user group in terms of discussing what the role of the commission should be as it's described in our zoning code.
So let's back up from that, though. I think the other thing, too, is the role of the commission is described in state statute. So there's really sort of different levels of approval. The first of which is some activities are allowed with no permit required, right? Then we have situations which are allowed with a zoning permit. That generally comes to staff. Staff issues single-family residence. If people want to build a house, they don't come to you. It's permitted, they go zoning permit. The next level of review is a site plan approval, which comes to the commission, and it's meant to be an administrative approval. You're meant to have standards in your regulations. You really don't have a lot of discretion. So some towns say, well, if we don't have a lot of discretion, why does it even come to us? Just let staff do it. So there's some towns that let staff do site plan approvals. And this can be small buildings or parking lots. There's thresholds in the regulations, but it's, again, administrative. Do you have the parking spaces, the landscaping, the setbacks? What do you got? The next level after that is now where discretion really does start to come in. It's a special permit. Or do you call them a special permit, special exception? Okay, special permit. So this is a situation, again, that in other states they call these conditional uses. So it's not like you're giving somebody a special break or special treatment no. This is a use that is permitted under criteria in the regulations, and the commission treats it, if it meets these conditions, you might consider it. And then after that, we get into zone changes and text changes where the commission has almost unfettered discretion. So I think as we go through the regulations, I'm going to challenge you in a sense to say, maybe there's, one of the things I'm going to hear is everything in the reg is a special permit. I got to, you ran through 8 applications tonight, which was continued to or carried on to or whatever. Some of those were site plans and application processing. Some are special permits. And people are going to say, listen, really? Do I have to go to the special permit for everything? And you're the judges, and you say, you know what? We think we need to do this, or maybe we could back off, and we'll help you work that out.
One of the things we did is we backed off the requirement of a second public hearing, right?
Well, we gave ourselves the ability to.
The ability to waive it.
To waive the second public
We
hearing.
implemented a while back a procedure for 2 public hearings for special permits. And I would say we,
One public hearing, continued, a mandatory continuance.
because there were several circumstances where significant amounts of information came out between the time we had our public hearing, where we voted and acted on something, and then subsequent to that, other information came out that would have been very helpful. Not necessarily to the applicant. But we probably waive 90%.
Yes. So is that actually in the regulations written, or that's just a procedure?
No, it was in the regulations.
It was adopted about 4 or 5 years ago.
I think we're the only town in the state that has that.
No, there's some commissions, so I used to be the town planner in Avon many years ago, and the commission had rules of behavior, if you will, and they were sort of bylaws or unwritten procedures or whatever, and the issue is they tried to act on things the same night. The issue is, this is it. Get your information in here, whether you're in support or not, the applicants, et cetera, staff reports, everything. We're going, you better be ready. And then if there was really a contentious application, then they would continue the hearing and allow for opportunities for more information to come into the record. But they were trying to move it in a kind of an expeditious way, and it's a delicate balance as to that type of situation. But the approach might be to try to close it in one night unless there's some reason why you think it should be continued, because otherwise we could keep a public hearing open for a year.
We kind of the ying on that one.
Yeah.
And said, where we believe we can waive the second public hearing, we do that. And so most of the applications that come before us get acted on that night.
Interesting.
And we have to have what we call a supermajority of the commission in order to waive.
Mhm.
So if one or two of the commissioners felt uncomfortable for whatever reason, then we would go to the second.
Yep, understood. So as part of my background, I was a town planner in Avon for a while. I worked for development companies for a while. I've been a consultant for, I guess I'm not going to say how many years, but in any event, I feel that having been on both sides of the regulatory process has really helped me quite a bit. And from an applicant's perspective, the 2 weeks, time is money. And it is agonizing if somebody shows up and asks for, so I think, let me just ponder that, because I think we would want the regulations to be clear, and this is the forum, and we're going to try to, find the best solution. So
We are also technically, we were being incredibly inefficient with our time by saying 90% of the time is your estimate that we are spending time voting to therefore not do something as opposed to having it the other way around. Perhaps 10% of the time we should be voting to extend. It's an interesting discussion.
yeah, I agree. And let me see what I hear from the community in terms of this particular issue.
Certainly along those lines, as you mentioned, if you just go through our agenda for today's meeting, there are items like, the fireworks tent. Is that we should challenge staff and the commission itself to decide that, is that something that needs to come before the commission or not? I don't have the history behind it, so I don't know why it was in there in the first place, you know what I mean?
The downside falls on the staff then.
Correct.
If all of a sudden.
Well, it's a discussion. I'm not saying that we necessarily need to give up everything.
Oh, you mean
Right.
in a parking lot?
Yeah.
Site plan amendment?
The
Walmart thing?
Yeah, or for instance, the Walmart, they're clearly getting ready for, Halloween, not like holidays.
So to touch on that, there are some towns, coastal applications, for examples, the state statutes do not require a public hearing for coastal site plans. They require a public hearing for special permits, for re-subdivisions. So the commission has discretion as to, example, the pool that was before you, does that necessarily need public hearing? So you have some discretion in your regulations. You always are bound by the statutes, and you have 35 days to hold a public hearing open, and an applicant can grant extensions, which has happened, to continue that. So there are, just in that time frame, you always have that ability to hold public hearings open, whether it has to be specifically written in the code or not. You are bound by the statutes. That gives you
One
that
of the
time frame.
good parts about having the CAMs, for example, come to us is it eliminates the perception that, town staff and Town Hall South just does things for people because they like them or they want to do it. So it relieves that
Correct.
negative
And it could
perception.
still be a site plan application, that there could be exemptions that don't need to come to you, but there could be coastal site plans that still come as a site plan application to you, but they may not necessarily require the public hearing aspect of it.
You certainly don't want to overburden staff without being necessary either.
I thought this was a long time coming, this process. And just on your timeline, for the month of October, you're going to be doing informational meetings. How many of those, Glenn, will you be doing?
I don't know yet. I think it depends on the list and the natural groupings, if you will, of people, and making myself available so that people don't have a small window and say, well, geez, that was the week I was on vacation. So I'd like to give people an opportunity so that I can do the best job for you when I hear from the most people. So to give that an opportunity so that I can get my thoughts together and come back and say, okay, here's the way I think we're going to proceed at this point. So I don't know yet, but I imagine probably your second meeting in November is when I'm going to try to be back here to give you my report, so that over Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, I'm working on the regulations. Uh-oh.
You might want to reschedule that one.
Oh, okay. Well, if we have to kick over to this, I mean, I think, I want to move,
Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so it might be,
yep,
right?
Thanksgiving's late this year.
Thanksgiving's the 28th.
8th,
Late.
that's
It's
the
the last
21st, all right.
I think you're,
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I think you're.
so, I mean, I think, I'll know more after I've had a chance to talk to people about what the schedule would permit, but I intend to come back to you with a report suggesting, here's the major findings, here's my recommended approach in terms of the next steps. You guys give me a green light, or we'll say, hang on a second here. I don't want to change the number of special permits we do. I don't want to do that. So do the other stuff, but don't do that, or, you know, do more of this, or whatever. So we'll have that conversation.
Don't want to keep you too late. Any other clarifying questions?
I can't wait.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the process.
We'll be apprised when you're doing,
Yep.
when you're doing LAP.
Yep.
Okay.
So I haven't set anything up yet, because, again, the first thing I want to do is meet with staff and then meet with the commission. Now that I've got these parameters in place, I can go ahead and do those meetings and have them in context, if you will, in terms of what's going to happen. So thank you very much for this. I think the scope of work was in here. I think it's fairly straightforward and logical, at least in my view, as to how the regulations unfold. There are multiple opportunities in here for public input and public comment as we go forward, as the regulations move ahead, and I'm prepared to work with you. So we're not bound to this schedule. If things are going well and you want to accelerate, we can do that. And if you say, whoa, hang on a second here, we got to ponder this for a little while, or we got a couple of very difficult applications, can we push this back? I'm prepared to do that as well. But I do feel part of my job is to keep us on schedule, because otherwise a project such as this can languish, and that's never good. So, thank you.
So will be something that we'll talk about at each meeting basically from now on, or like when we give our input on how we want revisions to
Probably
be.
have some conversation at least once a month about it.
Regular agenda item update, not that Glenn's going to be here for every meeting, but Aaron and I can
Have George or
update you on
Aaron
what
give us a
Yeah, we
report
had
as
kind of
to,
thought maybe
here's
the
what we've done,
second
here's where we
meeting.
are. Be great.
Maybe our date.
Thank you very much for coming, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Thank you very much.
I gotta tell you this. I didn't grow up, my dad worked